Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on today's show, well, the Bucks do in fact sign Gary Trent Jr. to the veteran minimum. Camille and I take a victory lap of sorts coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well as some of you are joining us in the live stream for this breaking news. All of that is part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The breaking news, Camille, is according to the report from Adrian Wojnarowski, the Bucks have agreed to a one-year deal with Gary Trent Jr. for the veteran minimum. But look, we joked about this on yesterday's show of it's got to come sometime soon. Maybe it'll come later in the week. Not necessarily the Bucks, but just Gary Trent Jr. signing, period. He was the best free agent available on the market. We had talked about this for weeks, too, of reports being out there. The Bucks were interested in Gary Trent Jr. And I get the hesitation and trepidation to push back and say there's no way he's taking that veteran minimum contract. But I go back, a week ago, when I think who was reporting the news was what put a lot of Bucks fans off the scent. But when we went through, let's just look at the finances of teams out there. Who has money to spend? Who has a taxpayer mid-level? Who has a full mid-level? We really struggled to find teams outside of those with a veteran minimum that either would have been interested or a fit for Gary Trent Jr. would have made sense. And to me, that was the whole thing this entire time that really kept me continuing to put out there. You can't dismiss this. I don't know that if I was a betting man, I would say they're going to sign him, but you can't dismiss this for that exact reason. And I think that's essentially what we saw. The market just was not there. And this was, in all likelihood, if you're choosing over vet minimums, this was probably ultimately always going to be the best fit for Gary Trent Jr.
We made jokes about that a few weeks ago at this point. I think when we first started throwing out Gary Trent Jr. as a possibility for the Bucks of, well, hey, listen, a one-year deal, the market hasn't shook out the way you wanted to shake out. Why don't you come to Milwaukee for a year? Come to Milwaukee for a year, rebuild that value and see what you can do from there. And we were saying, like, that's the sales pitch. The pitch for the Bucks in particular of all the different minimum contracts is that you will be the starting shooting guard if you come here. Like, there is a lot of playing time on the table for you if you come here. And again, the market just did not work out the way that was anticipated. I mean, last year he opted in to the $18.5 million player option. This current offseason that we're in right now, apparently the Raptors were kicking around, offering $15 million a year. He wanted $25 million a year. The Raptors pulled the offer off the table. And now Gary Trent Jr. was sitting here trying to explore the market and see where his best fit could be. And as we talked about, a lot of the money was drying up really quickly. A lot of teams that he could have went to, where it's just kind of like the money wasn't looking right. So it became a realistic possibility of maybe he takes a one-year deal to try to re-up that value again and try the market again next year. And we heard about various contenders having interest in him. The Lakers was a team that were after Gary Trent Jr. They were looking to make some other moves on the side to try to make that possible. The Nuggets, the 76ers, the Knicks were all teams that were listed in some way, some form as a team that has some interest in Gary Trent Jr. in addition to the Milwaukee Bucks. So to see him come to Milwaukee, where he gets to reunite with Damian Lillard, we know Dame's been on the recruiting tip so far this summer. The hope is that, he continues to do that and that Trent, he's here now. It actually happened. Like, I still can't believe that it happened. I made the joke, I'm going to be checking every time I see Woj or Shams. I'm checking to see if it's Gary Trent news. And the news came, Justin, when we were recording what we thought was going to be the Wednesday episode, but that's gotten bumped. So when you guys do hear that episode, you'll hear some real live reactions of us seeing that this move actually has happened.
And comes half a day after we record all right, it's cooled down. It's a possibility, but I don't think they're going to get Gary Trent Jr. So let's just take a look at their offseason and how we would rate that. We both said about a C+ is where you would put out there given what they had to work with, but added, hey, if you do get Gary Trent Jr., this is like a B+, somewhere around there that you're looking for in your offseason. And now I think it was an excellent offseason for John Horst and company because, again, we talked about it quite a bit on the show earlier today, actually, on Tuesday. So you can find that episode for that part of the discourse, but you didn't have much to work with. So you had to really try to maximize those vet minimum spots. As we mentioned, the duo of DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince are upgrades over Pat Beverly and Jay Crowder. Gary Trent Jr. is an upgrade over Malik Beasley. And now that leads us to the next part of the discussion is, we talked about this before of who's going to be that starter. And is it DeLon Wright? Is it AJ Green? Is it Andre Jackson Jr.? Well, I'm pretty confident that starting two guard is going to be Gary Trent Jr. So this is now 2 years in a row and we had this conversation with Frank. I don't remember if it was on the pod or off the air, but hey, is this it's kind of feeling like this another offseason where the starter at two guard is not actually on the roster at this moment.
And lo and behold, he was not because, well, he is now. It's just the timing of it is I'm still tripping over that because we literally had our show. We recorded it live on YouTube for Tuesday. And I mentioned as of, July 16th, this is the grade I'm giving the Bucks off season. It's still July 16th, and I have to update that off-season trade grade. And I think I'm going to go actually like an A- for this because the Bucks had such limited resources, like very limited. We've talked about it, only minimums, given the fact that there were no other trades made to like clear up space for them to make any other bigger signings. So to only have 3 vet men's at your disposal, and you were able to upgrade some positions there with Taurean Prince coming in as a Jay Crowder upgrade. You get DeLon Wright as a Pat Beverly upgrade, and then you get Gary Trent Jr. as a Malik Beasley upgrade. Like that's a really good offseason when all you had to throw is vet men's. Like that's all that was in the tuck, and somehow you were able to have some positional upgrades on the roster. Like that in itself is a big win for Milwaukee, given where they have been. And it also helps what they were talking about with what they want to do with the rookies, with Tyler Smith and AJ Johnson, which is bring them along slowly. And now you have these vets ahead of them. The competition in camp for the young returning Bucks vets, quote unquote, with your Marjans, your Chris Livingstons, your Andre Jackson Jr., AJ Green, I feel like I'm missing one of them, but those guys. Now, again, the comp goes back up again. There's someone ahead of them where you don't have to rely on them as much if they're not ready. It's just more options and versatility for the Bucks when they only have room to operate around the margins.
Yeah, I mean, again, you cannot overstate. This was a fantastic offseason. Now, if this is it, and I still don't think you're going to see any other trades. We can get into that coming up in our next segment. But as you mentioned, you only had 2 to 3 veteran minimums to work with and your draft picks. We can nitpick the draft picks and not attaching a pick to Pat Connaughton or Bobby Portis, for example, any of those players to get off of salary, to get under that second apron. But again, I just don't know that there's a move that would have made you better. Now, in theory, because we can carry this over into the next segment here, Camille, is I think there's one way that would have made it more interesting. It still ends up with you keeping or getting Gary Trent Jr., I should say. So we can explore that and just some more splits from Gary Trent Jr., what this means when we mention, hey, this is an upgrade over Malik Beasley. And we're not only talking about the defense, the offensive game, the full package of Gary Trent Jr. This is very much an upgrade that John Horst was able to pull off for a veteran minimum contract. We'll get into that conversation coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. Summertime for all of us may be that time of year when you hit the road. Maybe you're going to check off some stadiums and want to take a baseball tour this summer. It's the All-Star game later on this evening. That prompts us to say, hey, I want to go see that player play. I want to hit the road and check some stadiums off of my bucket list. If you're doing that, the one app that you absolutely need is Game Time. You can save last minute. Find up to 60% savings when you buy at the last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They even offer flash deals where you can save even more than that 60% with in-app exclusive deals on select seats ahead of the game or event that you're attending. You get to see the all-in price as well, so there's no sticker shock when you get to that checkout screen. Toggle that feature on and know exactly how much you are paying for those tickets. And if you're going to a ballpark you haven't been to before, or any venue, any arena, any theater, wherever it is, you can see panoramic views from your seat, and you get to see those before you make the purchase. Best of all, it comes with the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find those seats cheaper elsewhere, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, create an account, and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Gary Trent Jr. is reportedly now a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. So, look, credit to John Horst for pulling this one off. Bucks now stand at 15 players on the roster, which we've seen this pop up as well. As what does that mean for Thanasis? We pointed to, look, he's not playing this year. So the Bucks, I know the prevailing thought that's out there about how they run the team. They're not going to sign Thanasis just to sit next to Giannis on the bench. And now that's official because this roster is set at 15 players. And, you know, we kind of had a similar discussion about Malik Beasley on the veteran minimum of, hey, pretty good value. And in the regular season, it was great value for John Horst and the rest of the Bucks. But this is markedly better than Malik Beasley. I think we talked about this the other day. We're not suggesting Gary Trent Jr. is an all-defense caliber player on that end of the floor, but he is a better defender than Malik Beasley is, and he can do more offensively than just shoot. I mean, we've seen Gary Trent Jr. get hot and have some big games against the Bucks through the years. But there's more to it than just catch and shoot or one dribble, pull up and shoot from Gary Trent Jr. He's a more rounded offensive player.
He is. He truly is. And I saw this posted on Twitter that Gary Trent Jr. is one of 4 players to record at least 500 made three-pointers and 300 steals over the last 3 seasons. The other 3 players to do that were Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, and Fred VanVleet. And to your point about the defense being better, it just goes to show there. Now, when he got to Toronto, I don't feel as if he ever lived up to what Toronto thought that his two-way capabilities were. Part of that could just be because he had to take on such a big offensive load while he was there as well. And as we've talked about, sometimes when guys do that, then the defense kind of, falls to the wayside. So I do have hopes for him coming here. And again, he's young. He's 25 years old, turned 25 to start the year. So he doesn't turn 26 until 2025. A young shooting guard here. So him coming into the fold here, better defense. The shooting is there, and he's somebody who, when presented with wide open, shots, he knocked them down. He shot 51% on unguarded catch and shoot threes last season, and you would imagine that with the gravity of Giannis and with Dame, those looks will continue to be pretty wide open for him. We saw Malik Beasley be able to get up a lot of threes in that role. We've seen Grayson Allen get up a lot of threes in that role as well. So that's going to be something, seeing Gary Trent Jr. playing that role, that I cannot wait to see.
Career 39% three-point shooter, and that really peaked in the 21-22 season when he took about 8 threes per game. playing for the Toronto Raptors, shot 38% that season. His high water mark was 41% from three in the 1920 season with the Blazers, albeit at about 4 attempts per game. But he's a guy that we have routinely see average about 7 3-point attempts per game. Now, we talked a little bit last year about the 3-point splits for the Bucks. Of Pat Connaughton was one of those guys that was impacted when you look at the volume of threes that he took last year versus years prior. Well, you add Malik Beasley, you add Damian Lillard, those numbers, and Brook Lopez too. Those numbers are going to come down. Just for reference, Gary Trent Jr. averaged more 3-point attempts per game than Malik Beasley did in each of the previous 2 seasons. They were pretty in line the seasons prior to that, but exact same shooting percentage throughout their career. Last year with Malik, Camille, you mentioned his catch and shoot for Gary Trent Jr. We talked about this throughout the year. The looks that Malik Beasley was getting when you had Giannis and Damian Lillard on the floor with you, I think that went a long way in explaining going from a 35% 3-point shooter in each of the previous 3 seasons to a 41% 3-point shooter last year. So not to say, hey, Gary Trent Jr.'s shooting percentage is going to bump up by 6 percentage points, but I think you can start to see when you got that skill set, the gravity, and how much easier it makes it when those shots are wide open. And this is a better offensive player that we're discussing with that.
It truly is. And I saw the comment come through from Fidel just asking who was our backup point guard at this point. And that's a piece that we've talked about when we had the conversation, I think last week on Locked On, about who is the Bucks starting shooting guard. And looking at the roster at that time, it's constructed. He mentioned it could be DeLon Wright. But here with Gary Trent Jr. coming in place, we're assuming that he is your starting shooting guard, which I think puts
pretty
right
safe
in the
assumption.
place. Yeah. I think it puts right in a place that just better suits the team, where he can come off the bench and be that backup guard, point guard off the bench. He can just be a combo guard coming off the bench. You can play him with Dame. He can come in and relieve Dame, take that playing time as well. So I think like the roster itself makes a lot more sense now with Gary Trent Jr. on it as that starting shooting guard, and just what the Bucks could be able to do with versatility. I do like it. And the reality of this Bucks team is the same as it was last year, which is you need health. The top 3 guys have to be healthy. If you have Dame and Chris and Giannis, like your chances are going to be really, really good. And then you have to fill in the team around them with pieces that make sense of how they want to operate. And the Bucks have done that so far this offseason, again, with very limited resources all along the margin. So to have now to be able to throw in your rotation. So you have Dame, Gary Trent Jr., Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez. And then off the bench, you have DeLon Wright, you have Taurean Prince. We still have Pat Connaughton, but you also have Bobby Portis. Like
Andre
the team
Jackson
itself.
Jr., Marshawn.
Yeah, it's making
it alleviates some of the pressure on those young guys too.
Exactly. So like the team makes a lot more sense. And to your point about the pressure coming off of the young guys as well, I think that adds into what Doc was looking to do when he constructed this team in the way he did with having this many young guys on it, which is that pull and push between the vets and the young guys. So he said, the vets, they're going to pull along the young guys, and the young guys are going to push the vets because the young guys want to play. It makes me even more excited for this upcoming season to start.
So if there's one thing that's worth pointing out, I think it ties into this comment from Connor when we said realistically what the Bucks had to work with and what you could expect them to do. Let's just say they attached a first-round pick to a contract and you got under the second apron, or you were able to use taxpayer mid-level, which would have been more money for, let's say in this example, Gary Trent Jr. And you could have gone multiple years then, and then had his bird rights when he becomes a free agent, not next summer, but whenever that is, if it's a 1+1 or a 2+1, whatever, you would have been in a better spot to retain him beyond one season if that were the case. But not knowing that the Gary Trent Jr. piece was out there, and at that time of the draft, not knowing what the market was going to look like because Paul George had not signed yet with the 76ers. So, and again, we've said this several times. That is what imploded this market more than anything. It was tough to find a move where you would have actually been better on the floor opposed to just we saved money and we opened up something else to bring in a player that may not be at that caliber. Now, you got Gary Trent Jr. on the vet minimum, which when the offseason started, none of us expected. That's the good news is, hey, you on paper, I do believe, are a much better team than you were a season ago. I mean, you take out the coaching ambiguity and how much this coaching staff has improved. Year 2 or 1.5 with Doc Rivers. On paper, better players as well with, as we mentioned, those 3 pieces specifically, Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince. Those are all better players and put you in a better spot and younger than the 3 guys that they are theoretically replacing. But there is one, I don't even want to call it a negative, but the one thing to keep in mind about this move and why we keep saying, hey, this might only be a 1-year window for the way that this team is constructed. We'll get into that conversation and take a look at what this means for the Eastern Conference. There's been a lot of talk about the Sixers, the Celtics, the Knicks. Where does this put the Bucks in relation to those other teams in the East? We'll get into that conversation next on Locked On Bucks. So, Camille, I'm fairly certain. I am not the capologist, certainly of Bobby Marks level, or Frank or Van, but I'm pretty sure as we started to dig through this and just the assumption, even before we looked into the CBA and tried to find the write-ups here, you're not going to have his bird rights. Changing teams in a 1-year deal, didn't play with the team previously. I believe, I don't recall, no, I shouldn't say that, but I don't know if the Raptors renounced his rights or just withdrew an offer. But long story short, we're 95% sure there are no bird rights that come attached with this. So what that means is next year you can only offer him 120% raise. So we'd be looking at about $3.8 million that he could take for 1 year. Now, if you get him there, you could do something like a 1+1, and then you would have his bird rights, and then you could sign him long-term beyond that. But this very much should be viewed as this a 1-year deal. It's a prove-it deal for Gary Trent Jr., and if he plays at, let's even say, Malik Beasley levels, there aren't the questions in the postseason with Gary Trent Jr. that there are with Malik Beasley or were with Malik Beasley. If he fills that void, I would imagine there's a lot more money out there for him next summer.
I would too. And I'm guessing that that's exactly what he's banking on himself as well, coming to a situation where he knows he's going to get a lot of playing time and really have the opportunity to boost his stock next year and try to get back into that. Like going from wanting $25 million a year to taking a vet min is a big difference in salary. So doing the work that's going to be required to get back up into a contract that's going to be, at least 15, which is what the Raptors apparently were planning to offer, but they never officially offered to him. So again, I was saying before the sign on, this could be a really good place for a 1-year trial for him to try to get his market value back up. So for Bucks fans, it could be a situation where, he enjoys playing with the team. We don't know how this season shakes out, but there are going to be teams next summer that are going to be able to offer him a lot more money than what the Bucks are going to be able to. And it could be a situation, again, similar to this past season where the market shakes out in a way where you're surprised at who falls through. Even with Malik Beasley this year, I was seeing projections for him growing hey, Beasley could get maybe $10 million a year after his performance last year. And he got $6 million on a 1-year deal from the Pistons, which again,
a team that needed to spend money.
Exactly. And they only gave him 6. So it's one of those things too, with the new CBA, just wondering how that shakes out. But Gary Trent Jr. being 25 years old on a chance to play for a team that's going to be contending for a championship. I think that should do wonders to his value. So for the Bucks, take it this year, try to win it this year. And we know they have that level of urgency. They're here to win that championship. So, hey, the market just shook out in a way that really helped out the Bucks.
He is a career 14 points per game scorer. High water mark was the 21-22 season when he averaged just under 19 points per game with the Raptors. So I think that's the other piece of it too. When we talked about, he is a more rounded offensive player than Malik Beasley is, or was. He has that ability. in games when, because, one of the things we didn't spend a lot of time on yet this offseason, it's more of as we get closer to the season, hey, let's take a look at this. I do wonder how playing time is impacted for Giannis, for Dame, for Chris Middleton, just because I don't know that it's necessarily the correlation here. And this was tied to that. But you have to bring up, look, last year we had the games played restriction put in place for individual honors. And then we also saw playoffs where it seemed like everybody was injured. So I wonder if you're going to see teams pull back from that. Players, I should say, pull back from that, because they're the ones that have the most to lose in that experiment. But in those games, in those instances where you don't have, there's 60 points out of the lineup with no Giannis and Dame, you get Gary Trent Jr., who was more than capable to score 20-plus points on a nightly basis. And again, if that's going to be your fourth option offensively, I think you're in a pretty good spot.
A really good spot, which I think brings the conversation to the question of, well, where are the Bucks now in the Eastern Conference? Because I like to think of the exercise more so in tiers of like where the teams are. And the Bucks are definitely in the contending tier in the East. I would say that you give Boston the respect. They're still probably they're one in the East. And again, a lot of teams you're going to see they're doing moves to try to compete with what Boston is doing. We see that in New York with the Knicks and them loading up on wing players to try and combat what's being done in Boston. But outside of Boston, if you want to put them on a singular tier as, defending champions, they're the cream of the crop in the East. Cool. And then after that, I think you got the Bucks, you have the 76ers, you have the Knicks in there. And personally, I would still put the Bucks at the top of that particular tier. I love what Philly has been able to do with the Paul George signing for sure. That's a definite talent upgrade from Tobias Harris being your third option in that city. The way they've been putting that roster together it works. Like, it makes sense what they're doing in Philly. But again, a healthy Bucks team, which we didn't get to see in the playoffs this year. Giannis is such a game changer. Dame is a game changer. And I just really like that core with Chris Middleton and those secondary actions as well. We mentioned Trent. Like, I just really like this Bucks team. And I think in that next tier after Boston, I would probably have the Bucks ahead of Philly and of the Knicks.
I would put them in front of the Knicks because I think their offense is clearly going. Well, I shouldn't say clearly, but I like the Bucks offense better than the Knicks. At least the imagined version of the Bucks. Their offense better than the Knicks. And look, it was a big move to add Mikal Bridges. I don't think you can mention enough. It's a pretty big absence to lose Isaiah Hartenstein. Mm-hmm. And how do they replace him, especially since he had moved past everybody else? I know Julius Randle is coming back, but he was their best and most valuable big man in the playoffs. So that's going to be a big absence for them. I would still lean towards maybe it's the Knicks, maybe it's Philly. I don't think the Celtics are going to finish with the best record in the East next year, even though they're probably the best team, just because we've seen it everywhere. That year after you win the championship, you don't put your foot on the gas pedal quite as much. You don't push quite as hard. You don't have that drive within you. So I think the Celtics will probably finish second or somewhere around there. Bucks are probably going to be third or fourth in the East, and that's fine because of the upgrades that you've made. And look, there's no more easy path that's out there. We talked about it the last 2 years. It's not, well, if you do this, you can avoid that. I know we talked last year about you really got to avoid the 4 seed so you can put off that matchup with the Celtics. But, as we've experienced the last 2 years, well, you got to get to the second round first. So there's no easy path in the Eastern Conference anymore. But I just keep coming back to the chemistry that this team has started to develop now in year number 2 of the Dame experiment, of Doc Rivers with a more experienced coaching staff, taking some of the pressure off of guys like AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. and even Marjon Beauchamp, where it's not the point of, hey, we need to get younger and more athletic. These guys have to play a lot. No, we need these guys to develop, but you're not saying we need you to push for a starting job. We just need you to continue to develop and get better. And, again, the fact that you have upgraded your roster, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, regardless of how you feel about the 2 draft picks. You upgraded in the 3 spots that you could have. And this last one is a massive upgrade.
It is. It is. I see in the comments too, just some other teams to mention. Of course, the Pacers as well should be mentioned. We talked about the Cavaliers earlier this week, which is a team that switched coaches and they extended, Donovan Mitchell. But outside of that, the team remains the same for the most part. So they're going to be comp for sure. I think that would have them right behind, Milwaukee, Philly, and New York. But listen, there are some top teams here at the East. It's going to be a fun year for the Bucks in the East. And to your point about Boston saying they might not even win the East, I could definitely see it go that way. We know Kristaps Porzingis, he had his offseason surgery as well. So he's somebody who probably won't be ready to start the season. So they're going to miss him for a little while as well as they continue to go on from there. But I thought Milwaukee matched up pretty decently with Boston last year in the earlier games before the blowout game when Giannis hurt himself. The games were kind of strange where the Celtics opened up really big leads, but the Bucks were able to come back and make it close and push at the end as well. Yes, I can't forget about Orlando as well. Like there is some comp in the East. So seeing that the Bucks were able to upgrade their roster when, again, they just had 3 vet men's, seeing them find a way to upgrade when you see all these other teams around them making moves, getting better is exactly what you want to see. And above anything else, we've seen it in the comments, we've mentioned it here on the show so the everydayers know, but the Bucks got to be healthy. Like it really rests on the shoulders of Giannis, of Chris, and of Dame. Like be healthy and see where this team can really go.
The last thing too is Samson, Chris better playing back-to-backs this season. Look, I think if anything, what we learned last year is I don't care, right? I don't care if Giannis plays fewer games. I don't care if Damian Lillard plays fewer games because ultimately you need them to play in the playoffs. So if that's what gets you there, then fine. I'm willing to accept it, even if it means the Bucks are slide down to a 4 seed or somewhere in there because of the way they've started to build this roster. We talked about it last year, Camille. I agree. What you just said. I'm not saying the Bucks will beat the Celtics, but they match up better with the Celtics than they did in previous seasons. But you just got to get to that matchup. So, look, Joel Embiid is still out there. It means Brook Lopez is an important piece on your team. And we talked about perimeter creation, more guys that can shoot, more guys that, maybe not great defenders, but are at least two-way players. You've added that with Gary Trent Jr., certainly with DeLon Wright, and depending on the Lakers fans that you listen and take input from Taurean Prince as well. So I don't think less than 12 hours after we recorded how would you view the offseason? There's no way to view this as anything lower than like a B+ for John Horst and the Bucks.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going A- now with Trent in the fold. Like, bravo for this offseason when your back was against the wall. I wasn't really sure how the Bucks were going to make those types of moves, especially without making any trades. But lo and behold, we have a really competitive roster heading into this next season. And if everyone's healthy, the Bucks are going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Incredible news. Exactly the type of news that we were looking for. The Bucks sign Gary Trent Jr. to a veteran minimum. So again, I would assume he is your starting 2 guard. And between that move, the addition of Taurean Prince, the addition of DeLon Wright, to add those 3 guys, Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, in place of Malik Beasley, Pat Beverly, and Jay Crowder, massive upgrades for John Horst and for this Bucks team that, oh, by the way, already features Giannis, Chris Middleton, who we saw somebody else point out in the comments, basically single-handedly took the Pacers to 6 games on one leg. Damian Lillard, who we've already started to see those videos and everything else of Dame in the lab, putting some work in, the comments that he made and Doc Rivers made as well of, it's a weird offseason for me last year, but it's going to be a lot different this year. It's taken quite a few turns in this offseason, but we've now fully turned back to there is a lot of reason for optimism with this Bucks team.
There is. So with all that being said, I really wish the season was starting like next week at this point. But as we wrap up here, just one quick things I did see in the comments. We should mention that Pat Bev, we teased that he mentioned he was deciding between a vet man and signing a historic contract overseas, and he's going to Israel to play. So Pat Bev will not be in the NBA next season. He's going to be playing overseas. He's taking the bag And I don't fault him for that at all. So best of luck and best wishes to Pat Bev as well.
Bucks signed Gary Trent Jr. Holy cow, it actually happened. I mean, we told you, look, I still don't think it'll happen, but you cannot rule it out for all those reasons. And now it happens. John Horst lands another one here. So we cannot wait to see that backcourt, we presume, of Dame, Gary Trent Jr., Chris, Giannis, front court, Chris, Giannis, and then Brook Lopez to round out your starting five. A huge day here for the Bucks to add Gary Trent Jr. on the veteran minimum. On tomorrow, we're going to have the look back at this. Certainly, we hope, isn't one of them, but moves that did not pan out for John Horst through the years. The irony of recording that as he makes a big move in the addition of Gary Trent Jr. And we do have the mailbag to get to as well, so we'll get to that on Friday. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.